Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. Jerome Powell's term as Federal Reserve Chair is set to expire in 2022. This is providing President Biden with an opportunity to appoint someone new to the top of the most important economic institution in the entire world. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail the likelihood that President Biden will replace Jerome Powell with someone new, the individual that might actually replace Jerome Powell in the future, and the likely impacts that would have on our economy, the stock market, and most importantly, your finances in the future. So let's take our time, dive in the details, and jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, Jerome Powell's term as Federal Reserve Chair is set to expire in 2022. You might be asking yourself, how did Jerome Powell become the Federal Reserve Chair in the first place? Well, the way that this works is that presidents have the opportunity to appoint a Federal Reserve Chairman every 4 years. And what happened previously is that President Trump appointed Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to that post in 2018. His predecessor was actually Janet Yellen, who is now the United States Treasury Secretary. And what happened was when Jerome Powell was actually appointed by President Trump, he was appointing someone from his own Republican Party, whereas Janet Yellen was from the Democratic Party. And now the same opportunity presents itself for President Biden to appoint someone from his own political party into this post. Now, when Jerome Powell was appointed to this position, he had a lot on his plate. Not only did he have to deal with a very hot economy, he had to deal with a very challenging situation with his relationship with President Trump, and then furthermore, he ended up in a pandemic where he was pressured to keep interest rates low, to navigate through a process to keep the economy moving forward, and make sure the entire global economy didn't fall apart. So for the most part, he had a lot to deal with over the course of his 4-year term. Furthermore, now he's trying to navigate out of the pandemic to hopefully keep the economy moving forward without dealing with inflation, allowing it to become too significant and running rampant throughout the economy. So from that perspective, obviously he's had to do a lot of growth through the course of these last 4 years, but now he's in a position to maybe continuously move forward and actually run the Federal Reserve. And on that note, what I want to do right now is talk a little bit in detail about the likelihood of him actually getting reappointed. There are reports right now that President Biden's inclination is to continuously move forward Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell simply because he doesn't want to disrupt the markets. As you might have been aware of, during the course of the pandemic, we had a lot of volatility at the early stages back in March and April of 2020, but for the most part, we've continuously seen the stock market grow steadily, and also we've seen unemployment continuously decline over the course of that time. Now, obviously, we had a very tenuous situation that existed where unemployment skyrocketed and the stock market fell. So relatively speaking, those numbers that have continuously improved in the stock market and in the unemployment market are relative to what they were before the pandemic. Furthermore, you will notice the Federal Reserve kept interest rates at near zero throughout the course of the pandemic. This led to record low interest rates for mortgages, as well as for cheap money that people could borrow throughout the economy, refinancing their homes, refinancing their cars, and doing all sorts of things. And this could be argued that potentially had a negative effect that is leading us towards inflation, but we've seen previously in prior Federal Reserve chairman's approaches that continuously rising interest rates doesn't necessarily lead to decreasing inflation. You can look to what Paul Volcker did previously and how that really didn't curb inflation. And so what you're seeing right now, the argument being made by Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, is that by keeping these interest rates low, at least through the course of this pandemic, he's hoping to keep the economy afloat until it returns to some form of normalcy. And hopefully at that time, we're beyond some of the variants and the deepest impacts of this illness, and that's when the economy can move forward. And what we've heard reported from the Federal Reserve is that they don't expect to raise interest rates anywhere beyond 2022 or 2023. So up until that point, it looks like right now we're in a steady place. Also, you're going to see the Federal Reserve is continuously buying bonds and buying other equities, and what is happening there is that we're looking to see the Federal Reserve actually taper that, which could potentially lead to a taper tantrum, which actually causes some reverberations throughout the market. But setting that aside, getting back to Jerome Powell himself, he's had a lot of individuals on both sides of the political spectrum be supportive of what he has done. You've heard individuals on the left who initially argued against his appointment being very supportive of the fact that he kept interest rates low, and furthermore, you have people on the right who've argued that he's been a steady hand at the helm, making sure that we haven't had a lot of volatility in the market, because as you will know, when the Federal Reserve Chairman speaks, the markets listen, and he's very careful the way that he articulates himself and how he actually communicates Federal Reserve policy. So that being the case, it looks like right now this is an opportunity for President Biden to be bipartisan and actually reappoint him into this position. position. And this isn't anything new to have someone from an opposite political party serving the Federal Reserve chairmanship. This actually happened previously with President Reagan. It also happened with President Clinton, and it also happened with President Obama. So that could also be a continuation of that trend. However, this also provides Biden with an opportunity to put his own stamp on the Federal Reserve, especially since he has some pretty bold economic agendas that he's put together, and that could actually provide him with this opportunity to put someone new into that position. So right now I want to talk a little bit more about who that person could be. Now, before we find out who President Biden is going to choose to be the next Federal Reserve Chairman, it's really important that you point the like button for the YouTube algorithm. I'm just kidding, but if you wouldn't mind tapping that like button, it would help the channel a lot, help push this video to other people, and it would mean a lot to myself as well. So please do that if you wouldn't mind. Now, an important thing to be aware of is that President Biden is a registered Democrat, so he has a lot of pressure within his own Democratic Party to appoint a Democrat into this position, because being the chairman of the Federal Reserve is the most important economic institution in the entire world. So it wields a lot of authority, it has influence in global markets, so this gives President Biden an opportunity to appoint someone who is maybe more aligned with his philosophy and his politics. So there is someone who's being rumored to actually take on this role if this is actually what President Biden wants to do, and that's Lael Brainard, and she is actually a current governor on the Federal Reserve Board. And that is because previously she served in the Clinton administration and the Obama administration in the Treasury Department, so she has a lot of experience in that financial sector, and then being appointed to the Board of Governors has provided her with more experience throughout the course of the pandemic and also with all the volatility we've seen in the stock market over the last number of years. So President Biden is receiving quite a bit of pressure from individuals on the left of his party to actually appoint Lael into this position and not renominate Jerome Powell. And this is something that is very interesting to be aware of, because if she were to be appointed, this would create an entire new dynamic on the Federal Reserve and could impact the markets as a whole. But one thing to bear in mind before we get too concerned about what that might do and how it could lower the worth of our stocks, our investments as a whole, one thing you'll be aware of is that Lael Brainard has been on the Board of Governors for quite some time, and she actually has quite a good working relationship with Jerome Powell right now. It has been reported that she is one of his most trusted advisors, and she's actually been encouraging him to actually keep interest rates low, and that's actually been tacking him more to the left of what maybe a normal Republican administration would be doing in this type of environment. So in that regard, it does seem interesting that if we saw a new individual appointed, such as Lael Brainard, we might not see a huge deviation from what previously occurred with Jerome Powell. And that is something that we could take a little bit of comfort in knowing, because so far it has been so good with the Federal Reserve as it relates to keeping the markets calm, and we've obviously not experienced a significant recession. The one downside we have seen is this trickling effect of inflation, but that hasn't really run rampant quite yet. We're already seeing prices start to normalize. But furthermore, we've seen the real estate market get continuously out of reach for the normal middle class individual, so it'd be interesting to see if she would do something different in that sector. So with all that being said, it looks like there's a possibility that President Biden could appoint this individual into that position, and that could be a change of the makeup of the entire board. And it's not just Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell who's set to have his term expire. There are actually two other seats that are going to be eligible to be appointed in 2022. So even if President Biden goes ahead and he reappoints Jerome Powell, he has the opportunity to put two other Democrats into that position. And I just want to be really clear, I'm not here to advocate for him to appoint Democrats or Republicans into this position. I just want to give you as much factual information as possible so we can be aware of what might happen, because if a change is announced or if a new nomination is put forward, we could see an impact early on in the markets, and that can be something we just don't want to get too concerned about, thinking about the long-term implications of this new individual, or if Joe Biden is actually willing to reappoint Jerome Powell as a whole. So that's just something for us to be aware of. But what I want to do right now is pivot and talk a little bit more about the likelihood of what this new individual could do, but also the hurdles she's going to face to actually get into this position. Now, President Biden doesn't have the opportunity to unilaterally appoint this individual into the position of Federal Reserve Chairman. What he has to do is he gets to renominate either Jerome Powell or nominate Lael Brainard, and then it requires Senate confirmation. And that is where it becomes a bit difficult, because right now the United States Senate is divided between 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, with Vice President Kamala Harris being the tie-breaking vote. And if we're going to find that he actually goes ahead and nominates Lael Brainard to become the Federal Reserve Chairman, that is going to be a bit more of a difficult individual to actually get through Senate confirmation, because he's having very razor-thin margins. That is because when Lael Brainard was actually put onto the Board of Governors in 2014, she received bipartisan support from 10 different Republicans, and those individuals are likely most of the individuals who are gone and no longer in the Senate, so you would find it being more difficult for her to actually get into this top post. Whereas Jerome Powell has already been appointed, he's already serving in that role, so if he gets renominated, it'll be likely that he just continues to move forward without any sort of issue. And that is where we might find President Biden and deciding what he wants to do and where he wants to spend the most energy and effort. Because right now he's trying to pass a $3.5 trillion spending package, he's trying to pass an infrastructure bill, and he has other objectives as well that he's trying to get accomplished before the 2022 midterm elections, where right now indications are that he might lose the House and the Senate, or he might retain them, but likely it's looking in the other direction. And that could cause him to not want to expend political capital on this position, especially if Jerome Powell is continuously advocating for lower interest rates and overall has actually been echoing a lot of the administration's sentiment. But he might want to actually go for this and appoint someone like Lael Brainard, who he knows will be more in lockstep with his positions. So this is going to be a fascinating development. We will see more news develop over the course of the next few months as leading up to Jerome Powell's renomination being decided by President Biden. So what I think is important for you and I to be aware of, and why this matters to you and myself, is that we want to be able to navigate throughout the economy based off of what we know and what we understand. And right now, interest rates are low. We're still in the midst of a pandemic that's coming out to the end of it. Inflation is running a little bit high, and we are finding that we have very low unemployment, a ton of jobs available, but overall it still seems like the economy isn't necessarily working for the middle class individual, where it's really difficult to buy a home. Everything seems to be getting more expensive. So from that vantage point, I think it's important that irrespective of who the next chair of the Federal Reserve is, that we continuously make wise financial decisions in our own personal life to take care of business ourselves, to make sure that we're not going to be directly impacted if the markets react negatively or positively to what happens in the Federal Reserve chair. So that is where I always try to encourage people to do the following. Try and do everything you can to save money. This could be anything that you need to do. Cut back on your Netflix subscriptions, cut back on areas where you're spending money that you don't need to. But if you're able to save more money, that really helps. Then if you do everything you can to avoid lifestyle inflation, that will benefit you quite a bit. We live in a society where everyone wants to have the newest gadget, the newest car, the nicest home, the nicest clothes, and we feel the societal pressure from things we see on social media and what we see out in the world, where we think we need to buy something to have more worth and value in our life. That can be valuable for some individuals, but it's only going to be temporary. So my encouragement to you is that if you continuously adhere to lifestyle inflation, you're going to continuously find yourself in a difficult financial situation, because ultimately as you make more money, you're going to continuously spend more money. So try to save money and avoid lifestyle inflation. Furthermore, try to avoid debt. Avoiding debt is really important because that can place a burden on your shoulders. It affects you socially, mentally, and emotionally. And also it helps you to not move forward to actually achieve longer term financial goals because you're having a negative net worth instead of a positive net worth. Now that's why you want to avoid, financing cars, financing appliances, financing electronics. Instead, if you're going to do any sort of debt, really the only acceptable form I see is if you're going to take out a mortgage, because it's locked in, and over the time you're going to find interest rates with being as low as they are now, it's not going to outpace inflation, so it could be a worthwhile investment. But really outside of that, we should be spending money that we have, not money that we don't have. And that also, when we do have more debt, we're more tempted to buy things that we don't have the finances for. So try to avoid debt. And then what you want to do is you want to be investing strategically into the stock market. That is because you want your money to grow steadily over time. I'm not telling you to YOLO all your money into AMC or GameStop, or to go all in on crypto or anything to that extent. Just find something that you fully understand and that you can believe is going to have a long track record of success that's going to produce the kind of results that you want. And obviously it's up to your risk tolerance. It depends upon what you're going to prefer. I like to use index funds because those are slow and steady. They have a proven track record. They're going to yield anywhere between 7 to 10% on an annual basis when you adjust it for inflation of your dividends reinvested. And that to me is where I feel the most safe and secure. So no matter what happens, whoever the president is, the Federal Reserve chairman is, what's going on in Congress, I'm not stressed out about how that's going to impact myself, because the stock market is going to continuously move forward irrespective of what is going on. That's not to say there are going to be dips and valleys and peaks, but what you're going to find is that over the long term, over that 10, 15, 20, 30 year time frame, your money will grow steadily, and that's what I've experienced. But I'm just a guy on YouTube. I can't give you financial information. I'm just telling you what I've experienced so far and what I've done the research on, and how I actively am doing what I'm doing right now when it comes to my finances. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. Furthermore, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, do any research on your behalf so you can make wise and well-informed decisions moving forward. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create positive content that makes a positive impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time.